Hello and welcome back. We ended up last time by reading Genesis 1 through 5 together, the first paragraph of the creation story. God created light, and in verse 4, saw that the light was good. Vayar Elohim et haor. God saw the light, preceded by et, the marker of the definite direct object, ki tov, that, ki, it was good, tov. No present tense of to be in Hebrew, so you have to fill it in English. That it was good, ki tov. Spoiler warning, God is going to see that things are good, tov, 7 times in Genesis chapter 1. One of those times, tov me'od, very good. So you've learned your first adjective in Hebrew, and this is good. This is tov. Tov means good. But now we have to open up an area where Hebrew is different from English. In English, you can be a good man or a good woman. All of you can be good men and good women. Makes no difference what gender you are or how many there are of you. Good is good. But Hebrew adjectives have 4 forms, not 1. That's the first difference we have to explore between Hebrew adjectives and English ones. Before we launch into this topic, you have to realize that adjectives are a lot like nouns. They can actually be used as nouns, and we do this in English too. F. Scott Fitzgerald told Hemingway once, "The rich are different from you and me." Hemingway said, yes, they have more money. But the point is that Fitzgerald didn't say rich people are different. He said the rich, an adjective, but he used it as a noun, as the subject of a sentence. Hebrew does this way more often than English even does. Here's the wrinkle. Nouns and adjectives have to agree with each other. And Hebrew nouns and adjectives have 2 different qualities that always matter. They're going to matter for verbs too. Either they are singular, 1 man, or plural, 12 angry men. They're also either masculine or feminine. Men, obviously, are masculine. I'm not talking now about biology or physiology, but about grammatical gender. The noun ish, which can mean a man as opposed to isha, woman, or it can mean a person, male or female, that noun is a grammatically masculine noun. And it's singular as opposed to plural. And tov is a masculine singular adjective. So if I want to call someone a good man, he's an ish tov. An adjective that modifies a noun comes after the noun in Hebrew. A good man, ish tov. But what if I want to say the same thing about a woman or about multiple people? The adjective has to change in order to match the noun. We say that it has to agree with the noun. That means there are 4 forms of every adjective: masculine singular, feminine singular, masculine plural, feminine plural. And here they are: tov, tova, tovim, tovot. Again, tov, tova, tovim, tovot. Now you. I'm going to call your house tonight in the middle of the night and wake you up, and I expect you to be able to say, tov, tova, tovim, tovot. When you see adjectives with a, im, or ot, you need to know automatically what they are. Tova, feminine singular; tovim, masculine plural; tovot, feminine plural. The nouns will not always follow this pattern, but the adjectives will. Let me demonstrate. The word eretz, the earth, in Genesis 1, but also meaning a land or a country, like Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. The word eretz has the same shape as melech. Just replace mem lamed kaf with aleph resh tzadi, same exact form of a word. Eretz doesn't end with a, the normal signal of feminine singular, tov, tovah, but it is a feminine noun. Because Eretz is feminine, if it's a good land, it has to be tovah. In Numbers 14:7, Caleb and Joshua tell the people, the land is very, very good. Tovah haaretz me'od me'od. Tovah haaretz, good is the land. Me'od me'od, very, very. As in Genesis 1:4, God saw that the light was good. You have to fill in the word is. And in Deuteronomy 1:35, God calls this same land Haaretz HaTovah. Did you catch what just happened? There's a difference in Hebrew between a predicate adjective, noun is adjective, the land is good, and an attributive adjective, an adjective that directly modifies the noun, the good land. When it's a predicate adjective, a sentence, Dave is tall, the girl was smart, the order of the noun and adjective doesn't matter in Hebrew. The land is good or good is the land. The only difference from English is that in Hebrew, the adjective has to agree with the noun in gender and number. If Dave is good, he has to be tov. A girl has to be tovah. So, the land is good, tovah haaretz, or haaretz tovah. Another example from Genesis 3:6, Vatere ha'isha ki tov ha'etz. The woman saw, Vatere ha'isha ki tov ha'etz. She saw that, ki, tov ha'etz. The tree was good. You know what happened. But when it's an attributive adjective, modifying the noun, two things are different. One, the adjective must come after the noun, the opposite of English. And two, something else has to match, whether or not the noun is definite. Eretz tovah, a good land. Haaretz hatovah, the good land. So if you're saying that a noun is, was, will be good, or whatever adjective, when you're saying it as a sentence, you never use the definite article. It's just like English. But if you're modifying the noun with the adjective, a definite noun has to have a definite adjective. English only uses the definite article once, the good man, but Hebrew uses it twice, ha-ish, ha-tov. This can sometimes trick you because, as we saw with eretz, nouns often don't have the endings you expect, but the adjectives always do. Let's look at another example from the story of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream. Read more about it in Genesis 41, but Joseph explains there will be 7 years of famine, but there will be 7 good years before the famine arrives. 7 good years. Year is Shana. In the fall, when the Jewish calendar year starts, you can wish your Jewish friends Shana Tova, a good year. But if you want to say Shana in the plural, years, it's not Shana Shanot, but Shanim. Why? As a professor of mine used to say, you'll have to ask them. In Genesis 41:35, Joseph calls the good years Ha-Shanim Ha-Tovot. Shanim sounds masculine, but the adjective knows that this noun is really feminine, and the adjective never lies. A good year, Shana Tova. 7 good years, Shanim Tovot. And the good years, Ha-Shanim Ha-Tovot. Now, are years really feminine? Not in English, they're not. We don't say, she's going to be a good year. We say, it's going to be a good year. It, the neuter pronoun in English. Because English has 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, If an animal is male, it's masculine. If it's female, it's feminine. And with a few rare exceptions, like ships, if it's not a living creature, it's neuter. But Hebrew does not have a neuter gender. Every noun is either masculine or feminine grammatically. So what do you do when you're translating Hebrew into English? My first year teaching at Penn, I had a kid who was a chemistry major. He used an expression that you probably have to be a scientist to think up, and here it is: map to neuter as appropriate. So, hu ish tov, he is a good man. He isha tova, she is a good woman. He eretz tova, it is a good land. The masculine and feminine pronouns in Hebrew can sometimes be it in English. We'll learn those pronouns later. The point is that every noun in Hebrew, and therefore every adjective as well, is either masculine or feminine. No exceptions to this. And of course, it's a bigger deal than just nouns and adjectives. Verbs also have gender. Let's look again at that moment in Genesis 3 when the woman, she's not called Eve yet, the woman saw that the tree was good to eat. Vatere ha'isha, the woman saw, ki tov ha'etz, that the tree was good. But remember what we saw in Genesis 1:4, Vayar Elohim et ha'or ki tov. God saw the light that it was good. The root of the verb to see is resh aleph he. The yud, the y of all these verbs that God has been doing, tells you that the person doing the verb is a he. Third person masculine singular. When it's a she, like ha'isha, the woman, third feminine singular, that prefix letter has to change to a taf, vatere. The point is, verbs also have different forms for masculine and feminine, singular and plural. Now back to Elohim. As we've learned, despite the im ending, when Elohim refers to the God of Israel, it's a singular noun and takes singular verbs. But look at Exodus 20, verse 3. You shall have no other gods. No Elohim acherim, plural, masculine plural. Elohim can be God or gods, but Elohim acherim has to be other gods. The plural adjective tells us that the noun is plural here too. Now we're going to go back to the story of creation, but we're jumping from day 1 to day 4 when the sun and moon are created, so we can spend some quality time with adjectives. And the two new adjectives we have to learn are big, gadol, and little, katon. Like every adjective, they have 4 forms: gadol, gdola, gdolim, gdolot, and katon, sometimes katan, which is what it always is in modern Hebrew, katon, tana, tanim, tanot. Remember, they may spell an O vowel with a vav, but they don't have to. You can't depend on seeing the vav when it's an O or U vowel. Now, tov is a one-syllable adjective. When we added endings to it, the accent shifted. Tova, tovim, tovot. But we kept the O sound in the first syllable. With gadol and katon, however, two-syllable adjectives, the added syllable is now 2 places away from the beginning of the word. When that happens, Hebrew likes to abbreviate, not just with adjectives, but with nouns and verbs too, so be prepared for it. You might say that Hebrew likes to replace a vowel that's too far from the accent with an apostrophe. Gadol, but gdola. All right, now let's settle in for a look at Genesis 1:16, where God creates the great lights. Looks intimidating, but let's work our way through it. Light, the opposite of dark, is or. Vayhi or, and there was light. But a light, an object that gives light, is a different word in Hebrew, ma'or. Like or, It's a masculine singular noun. There are words for sun and moon in biblical Hebrew, but in this story, they don't have those names. God just creates Ha-Ma'or Ha-Gadol, the big light, and Ha-Ma'or Ha-Katon, the little light. Let's take a closer look. First thing that happens, Vaya'as Elohim, God made. Just like in Vayar from Resh Aleph Hey, only two consonants of the root are showing. This root is Ayin Sin Hey. Can mean to make or to do. Vaya'as Elohim, God made. Et, here comes the direct object, what God made. Et introduces the object because it's definite. Shnei ha-me'orot, the two lights. But remember, ha-ma'or ha-gadol. Is ma'or masculine or feminine? Gadol, gidolah. Gadol is masculine, and so is ma'or. So even though the plural is me'orot, which sounds feminine because of the ot ending, tov, tova, tovim, tovot, we know it's masculine. So it's ha-me'orot ha-gedolim. Shnei ha-me'orot ha-gedolim, the two big lights. Now the verse continues. The stars are very tiny seen from Earth, but those two big lights are almost exactly the same size. That's why we have eclipses. But even in those days, everyone could tell that one of those big lights was more important than the other one. So God made those big lights for two different purposes. Et ha-ma'or ha-gadol, the big light of the two, lememshelet hayom, for the governance of the day. You recognize the le, preposition that means to or for. Memshelet is a form of the word memshalah, which means government. The Prime Minister of Israel is Rosh HaMemshalah, the head of the government. Ve'et ha-ma'or ha-katon, the little light of the two big ones. Lememshelet halayla, for the governance of the night. Ve et ha-kochavim, the stars. One kochav, many kochavim. And all of these are definite things. The big light, the little light, the stars. So they all are marked as definite direct objects with the particle et. One more time from the edge. Vaya'as Elohim et shnei ha-me'orot ha-gedolim. Et ha-ma'or ha-gadol lememshelet hayom. Ve'et ha-ma'or ha-katon lememshelet halayla. Ve'et ha-kochavim. Genesis 1:16. Notice, by the way, in this chapter and frequently throughout the Bible, they love repetition. You have ha-ma'or ha-gadol and ha-ma'or ha-katon, lememshelet hayom and lememshelet halayla. You know that Yom and Laila, day and night, go together, and now you know Gadol and Katon, big and little. Pay attention to this kind of repetition and pairing, and you find that it helps you understand. Listen for the patterns. You may be wondering, how can the moon start out being called a big light and end up immediately afterward being called a small light? Jewish tradition has a story to explain what happened in between those two phrases. God created the two great lights. The moon said to God, "Can two kings wear a single crown?" That is, if we're both equally big, we're always going to be fighting about who's going to be the boss. God said, "Good point, you can be smaller." That's how Shnei ha-me'orot ha-gedolim, the two big lights, became ha-ma'or ha-gadol, the big light, and ha-ma'or ha-katon, the small light. Fun fact, this word ma'or in all of its forms occurs 5 times on day 4 of creation, 10 times in Exodus in reference to the light, the ma'or, that Aaron and his sons were commanded to keep burning all night in the tabernacle, and only 4 other times anywhere else in the Bible. Let's look at one of those extra 4 right now. It'll be a great opportunity for you to see how much of the Bible is opened up for you by the Hebrew you already know after just 6.5 lessons. Here we are in Ezekiel 32, where God is threatening the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Let's look at verse 8. Kol me'orei or bashamayim akdireim alecha venatati choshech al artsecha neum Adonai Elohim. In that first phrase, kol me'orei or bashamayim, the only thing you don't know yet is the ending a on me'orei. It's an ending called a construct because it constructs a compound phrase between the word it's on and the next word. Much, much more about it later. Everything else you already know, even including why I stopped at Bashamayim, right? Because of the Zakef Katon over the Mem in Shamayim. Those 2 dots that tell you to pause at that point. It's the end of a phrase. By the way, now you know what Katon means in the name Zakef Katon, a little Zakef. And yes, there is a Zakef Gadol. So let's walk through this phrase. It starts with kol with a kaf, so that means all. At the end of the phrase, shamayim, sky. Be, in, ba, in, the. Remember, it's short for beha, ba shamayim, in the sky, or ba shamayim, light in the sky. Kol me'orei or ba shamayim, all the lights of light in the sky. Let's ask King James how we did. Quote, all the bright lights of heaven, according to that translation. I think we did pretty good. According to the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, all the shining lights of the heavens. And per the Jewish Publication Society translation, all the lights that shine in the sky. Notice that these English translations use light for ma'or, so they all use a different word for or, the phenomenon of light, but they all used bright or shine to match the sound of light. Something good translators will do for you when they can, trying to match the style and sound of the original text. So that's the first phrase, kol me'orei or bashamayim, all the lights of light in the sky. Next, akdireim alecha, I will darken them above you. We saw the preposition al in Genesis 1:2. Remember, al panei, over the face of. And in Deuteronomy 12:2, on the mountains, al heharim, and on the hills, ve al hagivaot. This time it's al with a pronominal suffix, alecha, over you, masculine singular. The first thing in the phrase, as you might expect, is a verb, akdireim. That's a little bit above your pay grade right now, but it means I will darken them. Them, the lights in the sky, kol me'orei or bashamayim. The pronoun subject, I, and the pronoun object, them, are both built into the verb. The aleph prefix means I, the suffix aim means them, and the root of the verb is the letters in the middle, kuf, dalet, resh. Now phrase 3, venatati choshech al artsecha. Venatati, verb first again, and I will put, and then Genesis 1:2 comes to our rescue. Choshech, darkness. Al, on or over. Artsecha is eretz. Remember how it changes to haaretz, same change here, with that ha suffix again. Artso, his land. Artsi, my land. But this land is artsecha, your land. I will put darkness over your land. And finally, Ne'um Adonai Elohim. Ne'um is a very unusual word. It's characteristic of the prophetic books more than 350 times, only about 20 times elsewhere in the Bible. It's used to identify divine speech, and it's especially common in Jeremiah. Second place in Ezekiel, where we are right now. It's the oracle of, or the divine utterance of, Adonai Elohim. You remember from our discussion of words for God that the Tetragrammaton, the four letters Yud, He, Vav, and He, is understood to be God's personal name. Jews never pronounce it. Traditionally, it's replaced by the word Adonai, my Lord. But here we have the actual word Adonai immediately followed by the Tetragrammaton, something that occurs more than 300 times in the Bible, again, overwhelmingly in the prophetic books. And this time, Ezekiel is the champion with more than 200 of them. When the Tetragrammaton comes immediately after the actual word Adonai, you don't say Adonai again. Instead, in that situation, you replace the Tetragrammaton with the word Elohim, God. So when you see the English phrase, the Lord God, in a translation, and it's God in all caps or small caps, that means the verse is really saying Adonai, my Lord, and using it to introduce God's sacred four-letter name. Now that we've analyzed it, let's look at Ezekiel 32:8 one final time and just read it. All the lights of light in the sky, Kol me'orei or bashamayim, I will darken them over you, akdirem alecha, and I will set darkness upon your land. Venatati choshech al artsecha, an utterance of the Lord God, Ne'um Adonai Elohim. Let me remind you, please, how we got to this verse. It's one of the very few verses that uses ma'or outside of the fourth day of creation and the lights in the tabernacle. I didn't pick this verse because I had analyzed the Hebrew of it. We just landed there and explored. And you already had the vocabulary and the tools to understand 2/3 of it. I'm not saying this was an easy challenge, but when you work with an English text at your side, reading this Hebrew is an achievable challenge. The Hebrew you had already learned was there, waiting for you to put it to use. For the rest of your life as a Hebrew reader, you'll be doing that over and over again. Let's review. In today's lesson, we learned the four forms of adjectives: tov, masculine singular; tova, feminine singular; tovim, masculine plural; tovot, feminine plural. When you have a mixed group, you use the masculine plural. Tov, tova, tovim, tovot. The masculine singular form, what grammarians call the unmarked form because it doesn't have any endings, that is the dictionary form. The gender and number of the adjective always have to match the gender and number of the noun. We learned the adjectives gadol, big, and katon, little. And we learned the two different ways you can put nouns and adjectives together. One as a predicate, where the adjective explains the noun in a complete sentence, the man is big. Two, as an attributive phrase, where the adjective modifies the noun in a phrase, a big man or the big man. In both cases, the Hebrew adjective always has to match the gender and number of the noun, masculine or feminine, singular or plural. But when the adjective is modifying the noun, in Hebrew it always follows the noun. And it also has to match whether the noun is definite or not. A big man, ish gadol; the big man, ha-ish, ha-gadol. Predicate adjective is never definite, and you can say it in either order. The man is big, ha-ish gadol, or gadol ha-ish. And remember that a possessive suffix makes a word definite. Sus, a horse, but his horse, suso, is a definite horse. With that in mind, let's look at two more phrases from Genesis 27:15, where Rebekah is helping her younger son Jacob steal the blessing of her husband Isaac from her older son Esau. Here they are. Bina hagadol, bina hakatan. Ben, son, bino, his son, bina, her son. The suffix a, when and only when it has that mapik, that dot in the hay that tells you the hay is a real consonant. That's the suffix that means her or hers. And just like we say in English, my little brother, to mean my younger brother, my own little brother is taller than I am, not littler. Hebrew does the same. Bina hagadol, her older son, bina hakatan, her younger son. Each son is masculine and singular, but also definite. They are both her sons. So it's ha gadol and ha katan. Now it's time for our Numbers 22 challenge. It's a little harder this time, so I want to discuss it. It sounds simple enough. Find all the masculine singular, feminine singular, and masculine plural adjectives you can. Feminine plural adjectives are just rarer, and there aren't any in that chapter. But not every adjective has the a-o pattern of gadol and katon. There is one more you should learn right now, kadosh, holy. Look at Isaiah 6:3. And sometimes words that do have that pattern aren't adjectives, like the noun ma'or, a light, for example. And there even are verbs that have that pattern. So how can you recognize the adjectives? My advice, cheat. The same way I cheated for you in Ezekiel 32:8. Work with an English translation and use that to figure out which words are adjectives. What you'll really be doing is learning how to reverse engineer the English back to Hebrew. And that's a great way to learn. See you next time.